we've been spending some time over the last couple of weeks in our Sunday morning services, kind of taking this nativity scene and looking behind the scenes, looking to see how we got here, and looking at some of the things that happened in that nativity scene. So if you didn't get a chance to see those, you can check out our YouTube videos on our website. They're there. We walked through Mary and Joseph. We talked about the wise men and that kind of stuff. And we really tried to get behind the scenes. And today we're going to do that as we continue talking about the birth of Jesus and how he came into the world. And we're going to do that in looking at something that I think is kind of exciting, and you're going to be like, really? Because this is the section, if you ever do Bible devotions, if you ever read the Bible, this is usually the section most people skip. So we're going to read a genealogy today. Woo! I see how excited you are. We're gonna read through. This is really interesting, but you're gonna feel a rhythm in here, and you're gonna get a sense of history in here. Now, if you know me, if you've been around a little bit, you know that I love history. And so this is kind of a unique setting and a unique opportunity for us this morning to get behind the scenes and how Jesus got to this spot and what that means in our lives. So I'm going to read for you in Matthew chapter 1, the very beginning. Chapter 1, the very beginning of Matthew's gospel starts out this way. This is a record of the ancestors of Jesus the Messiah, a descendant of David and of Abraham. So he's now going to go through this list of everybody, right? So here, if you're looking for baby names, by the way, this is a great place. You're gonna hear some terrific ones. This is going to be good. All right. So Matthew starts out with Abraham was the father of Isaac. Isaac was the father of Jacob. Jacob was the father of Judah and his brothers. Judah was the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar. Perez was the father of Hezron. Hezron was the father of Ram. Ram was the father of Aminadab. Aminadab was the father of Nahashon. Nahashon was the father of Solomon. Solomon was the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. Boaz was the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth. And so here's some things happening already, right? Here's some names that you might be familiar with. Obed was the father of Jesse. Jesse was the father of King David. David was the father of Solomon, whose mother was Bathsheba, the widow of Uriah. Solomon was the father of Rehoboam. Rehoboam was the father of Abijah. Abijah was the father of Asa. Asa was the father of, and this is my favorite one, Jehoshaphat. I should make that like my password, but now you would all know that, so that wouldn't work, right? Jehoshaphat, like we're checking into David, just to write Jehoshaphat. Yeah, we know he likes that one. Jehoshaphat was the father of Jehoram. Jehoram the father of Uzziah. Uzziah was the father of Jotham. Jotham was the father of Ahaz. Ahaz the father of Hezekiah. Hezekiah was the father of Manasseh. Manasseh was the father of Amon. Amon was the father of Josiah. Josiah was the father of Jehoiachin and his brothers, born at the time of the exile to Babylon. After the Babylonian exile, Jehoiachin was the father of Shealtiel. Shealtiel was the father of Zerubbabel. That's a fun one. Zerubbabel was the father of Abiud. Abiud was the father of Eliakim. Eliakim was the father of Azor. Azor was the father of Zadok. Zadok was the father of Achim. Achim was the father of Eliud. Eliud was the father of Eleazar. Eleazar was the father of Mathan. Mathan was the father of Jacob. Here's where it starts hitting home. Jacob was the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary. Mary gave birth to Jesus, who is called the Messiah. All those listed above include 14 generations from Abraham to David, 14 from David to the Babylonian exile, and 14 from the Babylonian exile to the Messiah. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Now you know why we skip it. Right? You're like, why do I need to know all these names? What's this about? What's going on? So what this is going to do is it's going to help us figure out who Jesus is. Now, that's the idea that Matthew does as he's presenting this. Matthew does this and Luke does it as well. Those are the two who give us a genealogy. They want us to know who Jesus is because his ancestry states his claim. He is who he is because of those who came before him. That's important to remember. We don't see this moment, this birth of Jesus, as just a plop in history, right? This isn't just, all of a sudden, we went from BC to AD and that's it right there, right? No, there's so much more going on that actually proves to us who Jesus is. And that's Matthew's goal, so that we know who he is. I have a membership to Ancestry.com. Probably no surprise to some of you, but I wanted to do some genealogical research. And I wanted to find out some things. Technically, what I wanted to do is I wanted to see if there was an ancestor who fought in the American Revolution, because I knew that our family went back that far. And if I could find somebody who was in the American Revolution, I could become a Sons of the American Revolution member, right? An SAR. Woo! That means $1.50, and that will get you a cup of coffee. In certain circles, it will, right? Anyway. So I wanted to do this, and so I started digging into the genealogy of my family. I said to my dad, do you remember your grandparents' names? Because that was the place to start. I knew my grandparents, but I wondered if my dad knew the names of his grandparents, and he didn't. And he's like, I got to find that out. I got to figure that out. And he did. He found the names, and so I typed them in, and all of a sudden, things started opening up. All these searches, all these different opportunities to find out who these people were that were my ancestors. So on my dad's side, on my mom's side, on my mom's side, we go all the way back to we go back to the 1600s in almost every angle. But it's really neat. I found what ship they came over on. They left Amsterdam in 1753, landed in Philadelphia, took the oath of allegiance to the King of England because they were German. They were German Mennonites, actually, farmers. And so they came into Philadelphia, worked there for a little while, and then they moved out to Lidditz. You know where Lidditz is at, and if you're from Pennsylvania, that's the proper pronunciation. Lidditz. Yeah, and Lancaster and Lebanon. All those great places, right? And then my direct ancestor got land down in Maryland and moved down there and set up homestead down there, and I've been to his tombstone. I've been to the family cemetery. I mean, it's awesome to see this history, but it goes back even further. I can trace it all the way back into Kohlhoff, Germany, where he came from. So I've been tempted to buy a pair of lederhosen. I'm allowed to wear them. I'm German. Swing a Stein or something, right? Yeah, I mean, I can, but here's the really funny thing. Through my mother's other side, I'm Scots-Irish, so I can wear a kilt. I got the legs for it. A lederhosen, not at the same time. I'm not going to wear a lederhosen and a kilt at the same time, no. But that's who I am. I start digging back through and I'm finding all this unique information about who I am based on my ancestry. I don't know if you've done any of this kind of work, but it's fascinating to find out things like my great-grandfather lived in the house where my grandmother was growing up. So my great-grandfather, as my grandmother's growing up, it's one of these kind of, houses where Grandpa lives with us. Grandpa is a survivor of the 7th Army of the Potomac. When he enlisted in 1863, his brother Peter dies in the Battle of Wilderness, in which they both fight. And my grandmother grew up with him in the house. I mean, she grew up with a Civil War vet. It's like, so I look at the census from 1900, 1910, 1920, and he dies in 1924, and I'm like, oh my gosh, how crazy it must have been to hear the stories around the fireplace of, I remember that battle, or I remember seeing, that general, or names that we learn about in history books. I remember reading through all of the history, and I got to something really unique, and Julie said, so here's what I want to do. Let's just peel this back even further. So we ordered the DNA test, You spit. I know you came for Christmas Eve, and I'm spitting in a bottle for you. You spit in this bottle. You put a cap on it. You put it in a box. You send it off to Ancestry.com. They analyze it and send it back. And I was really curious because in the early 1800s, I had a relative who married a woman of mixed race in the early 1800s. Which must have been, you know the history of America, right? I don't have to tell you about things like slavery and the things that were going on in America at the time period. And my direct descendant married someone who was of mixed race. In the census, it says married and it says mulatto. It's the term they used back then. Her name was Mahala Brown. So I get the DNA back and it says I'm a portion African American. I'm like, I'm a black guy. Yeah. Now, what's kind of funny is, Land's Irish. Okay, he's part Irish. It's part Irish. See, we're just so deeply connected, right? It's who I am. And it's your genealogy. We got here somehow, right? Somebody came before you, somebody came before them, somebody came before them. And what Matthew's trying to establish is a genealogy of Jesus for a particular reason. Here's the reason he's doing it. He wants you to see the lineage of Jesus connects with every Old Testament prophecy that had ever been spoken about Jesus. He is of the root of Jesse. He comes from the household of King David. He is of the family of Abraham. All of these things in here, just identify. So here is the family tree of Jesus. It's really hard to see from where you're at, so you might want to come up afterwards and take a look at it. But it starts up here with Jesus Christ, which, there you go, at the very top, and it makes it all the way back through. Luke takes it all the way back to Adam and Eve. Matthew takes it back just to Abraham, which is right here in this family tree. You can see how thin it is down here, right? And then it really starts expanding out, right? This is the family tree of Jesus. And Matthew wants to make sure that we get it because he wants us to understand who Jesus is. He's not just a moment in time. He is a part of all time. He's a part of all history. Literally, Matthew starts by saying this. This is a record of the ancestors of Jesus, the Messiah. And the word record could in fact be translated, this is the genesis of the ancestors of Jesus, the Messiah. Now we know what the word Genesis means, right? Not the band, Phil Collins. But the word means beginning, right? This is the beginning. This is how it began. And that means we can trace it all the way back to Genesis chapter 1, where it says in verse 26, then God said, let us make human beings in our image to be like us. You see, in effect, what is being said there, because all the terminology for God is in plural. Matthew is connecting us back to remind us who Jesus is. He's the Son of God. There are over 300 prophecies in this Old Testament section of the Bible talking about Jesus, many of which talk about his birth. And Matthew wants to make sure that you understand, that I understand, that the people who are reading this understand very clearly who Jesus is. He is who he said he is. This is not fake news. This is real. He's real. Look, I can connect the dots, he says. I can take you back through and show you just who he is and how he got here and how he fulfills all of the prophecies. Because that's what he does. Jesus is the fulfillment. If you got your teaching notes out, that's our first word today. Jesus is the fulfillment of everything that came before him. Everything that happened before him, Jesus now fulfills. He actually uses that term himself when talking about the law, the Old Testament rules. He says, I didn't come to do away with the law, I came to fulfill it. He says that himself. It's who he is. And Matthew wants to understand that in this Jesus, this babe born in a manger, in a stable in Bethlehem, is really the Messiah, the one that was promised. And he does it by showing this genealogy, by showing this record of the descendants of David and Abraham, showing them his perfect pedigree, saying, look, this guy is who he says he is, and I can prove it. He says, let me connect the dots for you. And in a world like this, like we're living in today, it's really good to know that that there's the evidence for Jesus is so overwhelming in light of all of the things that are happening in the world today. I mean, so overwhelming, so much so that Matthew points out something I think is very unique, and maybe I don't want you to miss this. Here's what he says. He says, all those listed above include 14 generations from Abraham to David, 14 from David to the Babylonian exile, and 14 from the Babylonian exile to the Messiah. Now, some of you have done enough study in the Bible to know that the number 7 is a perfect number, right? That the world was created in 7 days. There's the aspect of the number 7 brings perfection. That's why 6 is not good. 666, it's a sign of imperfection. But when you hit 7, you have reached perfection. And what Matthew is saying here is, look, it's perfection doubled 3 times over. This story is about the one who comes perfectly to bring us life and to change everything, to take us from that place where it's all about the rules and all about religion, and take us into a place, into a time frame of relationship. It's now about a relationship with God. It's not about following the rules, making sure the sacrifices are done right, taking care of all the regulations that are found back in the Old Testament. Now it's all about a relationship with God through his son, Jesus Christ. And that's the age that we live in today. Now, Jesus brings that moment into your life and in mine, that we now live in Jesus' time. We live in his time now, a time when it's all about a relationship with Jesus. And if we're honest, some of us look at this and think about the relationship and think, wow, who are some of these people? Who are some of these people? And I don't know about you, but I uncovered some skeletons in the closet when I started doing some genealogy work. I started finding some things I didn't know existed. I started finding things my dad didn't know existed. I was like, Dad, did you know this about that person? And did you know this, Mom, about that side of the family? And I look at this genealogy and I see some really incredible things. I see Bathsheba, the wife of David, who is the mother of Solomon. And in order to become the mother of Solomon, David sends her husband into battle and then abandons him, so he ends up dead. Literally murders him. His name is here. It's Uriah. I'm like, wow, they left that in there. They left that in there. And then there's the story of the woman who did whatever she could to make sure her bloodline continued, or the prostitute who made sure that she worked hard to help the nation of Israel in hopes that they would in return help her. This is a genealogy full of real people like us, like you and me. And I look at that and I think, God, how did you use people like this? How did you use individuals who were sinful just like us, who just go off the rails like us? And I started reading even more, and I realized and discovered very quickly that it's just how God works. That God chooses to use real people like you and me to make amazing things happen in the world. God used these people to make that moment happen. We celebrate tomorrow because amazing people chose to step up and do the thing called life, even though they were imperfect. I don't know about you, but I'm imperfect. I don't know how you think about yourself, but I know how I think about me. I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. And yet, when I read this, I realize that maybe God could use us. Maybe God could use people like us to continue doing amazing things in the world, to continue making great things happen in the world. Maybe God could use people who are just as desperate, just as imperfect as these people. And what I end up believing through all of that is while Adam and Eve are here and Jesus starts here, the reality is this family tree keeps going, right? And it includes you. I mean, the wonderful message of the coming of Jesus Christ is that you now get a chance to be grafted into the tree, grafted into the DNA of who Jesus is, made a part of the family. You get to be a part of the family tree of Jesus Christ if you choose to believe in him. Matthew wants to make sure that you believe in him, so much so that you can become a part of the family, a part of the family tree of Jesus. Because you see, one day this baby will give everything he's got for you and me. One day, as an adult, he will surrender himself in such a way that he will give his life for ours. He will give everything he's got, his blood, his body, everything he's got. He will allow them to crucify him so that he could make sure you know how much he wants you to be a part of the family. That's how far he's going to go. He won't stop there, though. They're going to put him in a tomb, and they're going to roll this huge stone over the grave, and in 3 days, he's going to roll that stone back away from the opening, and he's going to step out, a resurrected Jesus, so that we could be the people who win over death. That we could be the people who will spend eternity as a part of the family. I want to do that. I want to spend my eternity as a part of God's family. I want my family in the family. I want you in the family. I think probably you want your family in the family, right? That means we need to say yes to Jesus over again today. And every day, every morning we wake up, we need to choose to live for Jesus, the one who gave his life so that we could be a part of the family, that we could be a part of the family tree, so that we could be grafted in and become a part. He gave everything. And so I just want to ask you on this Christmas Eve, as we get ready to celebrate one of the two most grand days of the church, Christmas and Easter, right? As we get ready to celebrate, have you said yes to Jesus? Have you said yes to him in such a way that you know beyond a shadow of a doubt that you're part of the family? Have you said yes to him so much so with your heart and with your life that you've stepped in and said, I want to become a part of his family. I want him to be my brother. The Bible says that when we do that, we become heirs with Christ. In other words, we're in the will. We get part of the inheritance with Jesus. So I want to pray for you this morning. Prayer is that conversational moment that we have with God, those wonderful moments that we can talk to him. And I want to give you a moment to say to Jesus, I want to become a part of the family. I want to become a part of the tree. I see what you're doing, God. All the way back from the beginning, all the way to now. I want to become a part of that. I want this Christmas to be the moment when I said yes to you over again. Brand new. Start over. New beginning. So I want you to just close your eyes for a minute. And it's just gives us a way to block out everything because we're such visual people, right? And so if we close our eyes, it just blocks out everything else that's going on in the room. And then I want you, because we're going to be talking to God, I want you to just bow your head before God, because that's what you do when you come into the presence of a king, is you bow. And so, Lord, with eyes closed and heads bowed, here this morning, once again, for some of us, we want to proclaim our yes to you. That you are the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, the wonderful Counselor, mighty God, everlasting Father, Prince of Peace, that's you. That this is not a fairy tale, this isn't made up, this is real. That you gave your life for ours. And that once again today, in this place, as we get ready to celebrate Christmas tomorrow and spend time with family and open gifts and all those sorts of things that have become a part of this celebration, today, we want to say yes to you. For some of us, the yes means giving up some old habits and old ways, things that we do that are not beneficial in our relationship with you. We need to give those up. For some of us, the yes means a renewed relationship, a new way of thinking, a new and renewed way of living our lives. A reminder that maybe we just slipped off the rails a bit, and this brings us back on. And for some of us in the room, we've never said yes. We've never made a commitment. We've never heard it presented like this. We didn't know. But now that we know the truth, we can say yes to you. We can accept you as the one for who you are. Thank you for every yes in the room. Thank you for the way that you encourage us to follow you and the way that you ask us to step in and become a part of the tree, the family tree of life. I ask God that no one would leave this room today without a personal relationship with Jesus, without a connection to Him that will last forever, for an eternity. I ask that today, Lord, in Jesus' name.